Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey into Pietro Ubaldi's A Man's History.
Think of this as your express route to the core ideas. Our goal here is to pull out the key insights, give you a really solid grasp without, getting bogged down in every single detail.
Precisely. Yeah, we're not aiming for a word-for-word reading. It's more about highlighting the crucial moments, the shifts in thinking of this
Mhm.
really complex individual in the text.
Okay.
We'll track his journey, those points where his, let's say, ideals kind of slammed into reality.
Okay, let's dig in then.
Here.
So, right at the start, the translator's note gives us a heads up. This isn't going to be a simple, sunny story.
No.
It hints at a real change in the protagonist, a
Mhm.
move from maybe a naive sort of idealism towards something much more grounded.
Torched in fire, you might say.
Exactly. Forged through some tough experiences. It even suggests these hardships led to, a spiritual refinement. For you, the learner, it's that idea that sometimes the biggest growth comes from the hardest times.
And what's really striking right from the beginning is the author's drive. What's motivating him.
Uh-huh.
He's clearly pushing back against what he sees as, I don't know, inertia, selfishness, maybe,
Yeah.
a kind of superficiality in modern society.
Yeah.
His goal seems to be to, reignite some faith, some hope, offer a different path.
It's interesting, though, because he doesn't just throw out all of modern progress. He acknowledges the steps forward, social structures, science, labor.
Right, he sees the advances.
But at the same time, he really elevates the individual's inner journey, the spiritual side, almost saying, today's utopian dreams could actually be tomorrow's reality.
It's like parallel tracks of progress, the
Yeah.
outer world and the inner self.
Yeah, exactly.
And he connects this to a bigger picture. He puts forward this idea of a fundamental law for the planet.
Which is?
Progress, evolution, always moving towards what he calls God. And humanity is at the very forefront of this.
Push forward how?
Push forward by, he says the selection of the best through struggle. It suggests challenges aren't just random obstacles, but part of this engine of evolution.
In driving that evolution, he sees these two core forces, right? Masculine and feminine?
Yes, but complementary, not
Yeah.
opposed. Masculine is will, strength. Feminine is beauty, love.
Hmm.
He sees them as essential halves. Neither is complete without the other. Both striving. Needing both drive and connection.
That makes sense.
Uh,
And how does he describe his own philosophy? Is it all abstract?
no, not at all, he insists. He calls it practical, objective, rooted firmly in lived human reality, not just theories cooked up in an armchair.
So something you can actually see playing out.
That's the idea. He thinks it's observable, whether people consciously recognize it or not.
So, okay, what's the point then? How should we live according to this view?
Well, he's pretty direct about that. The aim of life is constant betterment, making yourself better, your nation, your race, always improving.
And evolution fits in there.
Yeah, he has this great phrase for it, creation in the spirit. It links our, biological journey with our spiritual one.
I like that, creation in the spirit.
And this progress, it's not messy or chaotic in his view. It's a move from disorder towards more and more harmonization.
Harmonization.
Yeah, the whole universe is moving towards God, and he equates God with harmony, like a divine intelligence expressing itself as order.
And usefulness. Does he define that? Is it about, worldly success?
Definitely not. For him, true usefulness is the conquest of unseen moral values. That's where the real value lies.
Okay. And truth.
Truth, he says, is simple. It serves life. And living it is way more important than just, talking about it or professing it.
Action over words.
Totally. Put your principles into practice.
And all this understanding comes from where? Just thinking.
No, he really stresses
Yep.
personal experience and observing how the universe works, organically. That's his foundation, not relying on dogma or just pure intellect. It's very direct.
Got it. Okay, so the story itself, it unfolds against quite a backdrop, right? The 20th century.
Huge changes happening then. Yeah, it's not happening in a vacuum. And within that, we get his definitions of the world and the common man. These are key terms.
Right. We need to understand what he means by them.
Exactly. So the world for him isn't just, the planet Earth. It has this strong moral dimension. It's let's say, the inferior human laws of Earth,
Contrasted with.
contrasted with the higher laws of heaven. It's a value judgment, really.
Okay. And the common man. Or he also calls him the normal man.
Yeah, he paints this picture of the dominant type, uniform, driven by basic instincts mostly. conforming to social rules just for, like, practical reasons to get along.
And lacking something.
Lacking, in his view, those deeper spiritual passions or drives. It's almost a kind of sociological category he's creating.
Did he observe something interesting about even perceptive people?
Yeah, that even insightful folks often end up adopting the common man's psychology. Why? Pure necessity, just to function in society.
Like social camouflage.
That's a good way to put it, just blending in to get by.
He also talks about progress not being linear, like it's cyclical.
Right. He thinks before we can really leap forward, we have to keep going back, reinforcing the foundations, like checking the base of a building before you add more floors. Repetition, review, consolidation.
Okay. And then there's his take on Darwin and atheism,
Mm.
which is kind of surprising.
Yeah, he finds it totally illogical that Darwinism led some people to atheism.
Yeah.
He actually argues the opposite.
Really? How?
He thinks materialism, understood correctly, scientifically proves God's existence. It's a very counterintuitive argument he makes.
Wow. Okay. And he's not impressed with the promises of science and reason.
No, he's critical. He points out that the earthly paradises they promised haven't exactly shown up.
Right.
For him, a real new civilization needs more than just tech or better systems. It needs individuals to transform spiritually from the inside out.
He even looks ahead, suggesting future generations might laugh at our current ideas of honor based on wealth and status.
Yeah, like we look back at, I don't know, powdered wigs or something. He thinks true happiness isn't about stuff. It's about a high degree of consciousness, way beyond material comfort.
Well, getting more personal now about the protagonist himself.
Yeah,
He's shaped by his origins, right? Like we all are.
definitely. He mentions his Umbrian intuition, racial traits, he calls them, and he also considers things like astrology, even this science of vibrations. It's a very holistic picture,
A mix of influences.
a whole mix. And he talks about personality having these two zones.
Zones?
Yeah, like a zone of determinism, instincts, subconscious stuff, and then a zone of free will where the I is constantly being formed by our choices, our experiences.
Destiny isn't fixed.
Not entirely. He sees destiny as like an initial push, an impulse from before. But our present will, our choices now, can actually correct or redirect it. It's quite empowering, really. We have agency.
Okay, let's shift to his early life now. This process of self-discovery wasn't quick or easy for him, was it?
No, definitely not. He describes his consciousness as being deeply situated. It made finding himself a slow, laborious process.
He couldn't just copy others.
Exactly. He couldn't live by imitation. He felt this deep need to understand the reasons behind things consciously, not just go through the motions.
So his childhood looked normal on the outside.
Outwardly insignificant, he says, but inside. Intense observation, exploration. He felt like he was concealing this other self, this weary self, looking for something more profound.
A hidden inner life.
Very hidden and filled with these powerful, almost primal feelings.
Like what?
A vague but huge sense of pain, a feeling of having fallen somehow, and this intense yearning for, like, unrestrained freedom, feeling trapped in his body.
Those are deep feelings for a child. Existential stuff.
Absolutely. That feeling of being confined, of longing for something lost.
But he still held on to a core belief.
Yes, despite all that inner turmoil, he had this fundamental instinct that God is just and good. That became a bedrock for him, shaping his life's motives even when things were tough.
A constant tension there.
A real interplay between suffering and faith.
And as a young man, certain places called to him.
Yes, these cities of silence and dreams, he calls them. Assisi, Gubbio. He felt something eternal in their old walls, like they resonated with his soul.
Places that feel timeless. We all have those, I think.
Yeah, that sense of connection to something bigger than yourself. He also remembers this inner light from childhood.
A light.
A friendly inner light, he describes it. Something others didn't seem to get, maybe an early hint of his spiritual inclination.
And then a major influence enters the picture, St. Francis.
Hugely significant. He was deeply moved by Francis's spiritual splendor, found solace there, inspiration. Franciscan sites became key places in his search for his own destiny's meaning.
Trying to understand his own life through Francis's example.
In a way, yes. And this feeling of having fallen, needing expiation, it led him to explore places like Versailles.
Versailles? Why?
Trying to understand history, maybe find connections to his own struggles. It's very symbolic, looking for patterns, for meaning in his own pain.
He really questioned why his pain felt so specific, didn't he?
Yes, not just random suffering. He wondered if it was direct payback, expiation for past errors. It suggests a belief in some kind of cosmic justice or karma, a deep search for meaning within the suffering.
Okay, let's talk about him navigating society's school. How did he view formal education?
As a study and adaptation, mostly, he did what he needed to pass, but his real learning, his intellectual cultivation, happened elsewhere.
Where?
In social interactions with his peers, that's where he saw the real exercise of life. Observing their slang, their rules, their codes of honor and duty, learning by watching.
And a specific word hit him hard in high school.
Evolution, yeah. He says hearing that word was a major moment. It became this core idea for him, shaping how he saw everything.
One word can do that.
Absolutely. And even younger, he was exploring his own senses, perception, feeling separate from his body, pondering space and time. That philosophical bent was there early.
But fitting in wasn't easy. He learned some hard lessons.
Oh, yeah. He found his sincerity was seen as naivety, his kindness, foolishness. Patience looked like weakness. He realized he had to learn the world's language, which wasn't his own.
A tough realization.
And it led him to see these two worlds operating simultaneously.
Two worlds.
A higher world, the one people talked about, virtues, ideals, seemed almost fictitious to him. And then the lower, real world running on self-interest and force.
That sounds disillusioning, seeing that hypocrisy.
Deeply. It made him wonder, are people more miserable or just wicked? A really fundamental question about human nature.
And he felt out of sync with this.
Totally. He saw humanity as caught between two evolutionary phases, leftover animality and a glimpse of future perfection. He felt unwell because he wasn't like the normal man, comfortably in the middle.
So, law school.
Yeah.
That wasn't really his passion.
Seems not. He was sent there, but he used the time his own way. Learned languages saw that as key to understanding different people's psychology. Studied music to grasp the spirit of things.
Avoiding what he disliked.
Yeah, he hated sophistry, clever arguments about relative truths, wanted something more solid.
And his real education came later.
After graduation, he says, through struggle and pain. Those were his true teachers. He admired thinkers like Darwin, Hegel, but knew their ideas were still being debated, modified.
Did he travel much to learn?
Interestingly, no, not physically, for some things. He explored the Asian Orient through books, found he could connect more deeply with historical places through inner reflection than by actually going there.
Like Egypt and India.
Particularly drawn to them, yes, and Palestine at the time of Christ.
That held special meaning.
Profound spiritual significance. He'd visualize the gospel figures in their environment, like this grand cosmic symphony playing out. A very personal, vivid connection.
Okay, thinking about instinct now.
Right.
How did he come to understand the role of instinct in society?
He saw the instinct-driven system as, well, nature's practical approach. Economical. It simplifies things for survival, especially when life is prolific, easier than complex thought for everyone.
So the normal person's social life.
Saves energy, he thought. Nature doesn't burden the masses with complex instructions when basic survival is still the main game for many. It's efficient, in a way.
And his own isolation. How did he frame that?
As the price you pay for not just being one of the sheep. He accepted his path, even though it was painful and lonely, saw it as a duty almost, preserving his own inner quality, his nobility, despite outward circumstances.
The conscious choice.
Very much so. Authenticity over conformity.
And he thought a lot about pain itself, didn't he? The different kinds.
Yeah, he really reflected on its variety. Heroic pain, pitied pain, ignored pain, guilty, innocent, physical, moral. The kind that just eats away at your soul quietly.
He saw its full spectrum.
Absolutely. And its impact,
Yeah.
which led him back to that question of justice.
Yep.
Yeah. How can it be fair that people are born with such different lots in life? For pain to be just, he argued, there has to be some responsibility linked to its cause. Connects back to free will and destiny.
And his own trials, they weren't sudden.
No, they came gradually, allowed him time to adapt, to try and understand. He called it a siege of adversities, like a slow attack aimed at his lower self, his desires.
A process of refinement.
Exactly. Inner purification through outer pressure.
And this process led to a big shift in him.
A major spiritual transformation started then. He began finding his true self, moving away from just going along with the crowd, starting to act from his own core being.
Becoming authentic.
Yes, journeying towards true selfhood.
And he saw specific paths opening up?
He identified three main ones. Self-knowledge, first, then liberating renunciation, letting go, achieved through embracing the pain, and third, moving closer to the figure of Christ. These were his guiding direction.
And temptation came along too, specifically wealth.
Yes. Destiny, as he puts it, presented wealth as a temptation, But crucially, it was surrounded by things he found repulsive: superficiality, bad behavior,
He rejected it.
developed a real detestation for it. And that conscious, free choice to turn away from wealth was a huge first step in his spiritual climb.
And that lined up with the gospel.
Deeply resonated with the teachings about the poor and the rich. It confirmed his direction
He felt the injustice of economic systems.
profoundly. And that commandment, love thy neighbor, hit him hard. It led him to actually choose to live among the poor, share their lives, earn his own way through labor.
Not just theorizing about it.
No, living it, making it real.
Did that go smoothly?
Not surprisingly, no. He encountered resistance, established interests, people benefiting from the system, pushback. Challenges the status quo, you expect that.
And his experience gave him a strong view on wealth management.
Yeah, pretty radical one. He came to feel managing wealth could basically be the same as stealing, but he also felt he couldn't just stand by and let injustice happen.
A dilemma.
A big one. How do you ethically free up your own inheritance for, say, Franciscan poverty? It was a complex moral knot for him.
And giving itself was complicated.
He found it really hard to give without causing harm somehow. He observed that many poor people were just frustrated. Rich people focused on getting material stuff, not embracing spiritual poverty, a very nuanced view.
So he pursued dispossession, getting rid of his wealth, but with a specific goal.
Right. Methodically. But it wasn't about running away. It was about getting closer, working alongside the dispossessed, truly understanding their lives. He rejected charity that just keeps the rich-poor divide going.
Wanted solidarity, not paternalism.
Exactly. Genuine understanding.
And what did he gain from this process?
Self-reliance. Discipline. He realized health follows biological laws, not bank balances, a stripping away of external dependencies.
But it wasn't easy physically.
No, he suffered physically, but his life center, he said, was always in the spirit. Conceiving, creating, conquering, progressing. That was his core.
Medicine couldn't fix his core issue.
No, he felt this deep split, this dissension between spirit and body. He found balance only in the struggle itself.
And he sought solitude again.
Yeah, went to a rocky hill, seeking inner revelation. Sensed a big transformation was coming. That image of seeking insight in stark nature keeps recurring.
And providence or fate intervened.
Both internally and externally, he felt. But the internal, the spiritual change, that was the real primary result of all his trials. A fundamental reshaping inside.
How did his understanding change?
Through this long wrestling with pain, it matured. Knowledge wasn't just information anymore. It became the spontaneous quality of his spirit. Like his inner depths were revealed through purification.
Leading to a different sense of self.
A vaster self, he called it, oriented towards the whole, towards interconnectedness. And that brought balance, mastery, independence, peace.
Did he share this?
He tried to share the results, yeah. Got mixed reactions.
Yeah.
But his main focus was still on his own growth, his own maturity.
So after all this inner work, did his focus shift outwards?
It did. Having worked through his own big questions, universal and personal, he felt ready to consciously contribute to the whole organism, the universe. His life found deeper meaning by harmonizing with the cosmos.
A sense of purpose.
A renewed sense of purpose, yeah. And this inner maturing led to a desire to be active, operative, in the earthly community. He saw his earthly mission now.
To share what he'd learned.
Exactly. Share his achievements for the collective good, moving from just personal growth to contribution.
And the role of pain changed.
He felt pain as a primary tool had done its job. Now it was time to assimilate the results. Fate granted a truce, he felt. God's law isn't about endless suffering, it's about understanding, progressing.
Negatives turning positive.
Yes, negation converted to affirmation. The past was bearing fruit now.
And this brought changes in his life.
Abundance, he says, both spirit and material provision. Even a new social position replacing that old vow of poverty. The trials yielded understanding transformed him. His destiny felt aligned, his life revalued by this mission of good.
How did the world react to this new phase?
Well, he noticed people are impressed by effects, by success. They blindly follow winners, he thought, because of that biological law of selection. So, in the world's eyes, he had now won.
A bit cynical, maybe?
Perhaps realistic from his perspective. But he valued the suffering more.
Why?
He saw the suffering as the sowing, the essential groundwork. The human triumph was just the harvest. The process mattered more than the outcome to him.
And he committed to this harvest.
Totally. Worked intensely. Fully dedicated to sharing his insights.
But there was a personal cost. His mother's death.
Yes. That highlighted starkly how the world often just doesn't care about your personal life when you're focused on some larger work. A painful reminder of that disconnect.
Did he still find value in simplicity?
Yes, the daily resistance of a simple life kept tempering him. He even found a kind of moral, artistic beauty in some humble human conditions, but he remained an enemy of the world's values.
And solitude still played a role. In the mountains.
Crucial. It was terrifying sometimes, he admits, but also brought comfort. Visions strengthened his spiritual life, revealed deeper truths hidden behind human appearances.
He also had thoughts on science in these experiences.
Yeah, he cautioned science against just dismissing supersensory stuff out of hand, especially with new ideas emerging, like that science of vibrations. Keep an open mind, basically.
So this midlife period was a peak for his mission.
The culmination, yeah, fulfilling his mission, getting his knowledge out there successfully, peak influence, peak productivity.
But he saw trouble ahead.
He predicted it. This success would only bring a temporary break from misunderstanding. Soon as his thought was better understood, it would turn to aggression. Though a minority would get it, would collaborate.
Like Russian.
Challenging ideas often provoke backlash, and the intense spiritual focus he maintained, it accelerated his own evolution, pushed him towards mystical catharsis, a deep inner purification.
What sustained him through this?
His inner spiritual fire, he says, that kept him going. Plus, the external validation helped his books getting published, translated, reaching people.
But it took a physical toll.
Immense. Years of high nervous tension, working under bad conditions. The body, the matter, had to pay for the spirit's effort. Deep exhaustion followed the productive high.
A natural consequence.
He saw it as almost a law. The peak of worldly exaltation creates an imbalance, demands compensation. It's a setup for the world's aggression, like Palm Sunday before the crucifixion. A universal pattern.
So the peace was temporary.
The piece of misunderstanding, yeah, had to fall. The clash between his ideal and the world was unavoidable. Rebellion would come as his real aims became clear. He knew he'd have to pay for messing with human interests.
How did he handle those moments?
When things got really tough, he waited, trusted that events would resolve themselves somehow. Felt finished at times, but survival was the only focus then. Just keep going.
He had some thoughts on why people who speak truth get attacked.
Yeah, he felt anyone who proclaims truths above group interests gets hit from all sides. Groups protect their own turf.
But progress still happens.
Paradoxically, yes, even through exploitation. Groups eventually adopt and use the ideas of the very people they attacked.
And the ideal itself sometimes needs to compromise.
He realized that, pragmatically, to survive, to be understood eventually, the ideal might have to descend a bit, meet people where they are so it's not completely rejected.
Did people misunderstand his work in specific ways?
Yes, unforeseen applications, literal interpretations. People judged the letter, not the spirit, clung to the words, missed the deeper meaning. Frustrating for him.
And the world seemed focused on
Pleasures, mostly. Sincerity, idealism, seen as abnormal, even suspicious. Because he rebelled against just living like an animal, he was isolated. Biological laws, he felt, favored destroying the exception, pushing towards conformity.
So the core conflict remained.
Always spirit versus matter, him against the world. But he tried to forgive, understanding maybe they just couldn't rise above the animal plane easily. Found his reason, justification, strength in Christ.
But he still questioned the struggle.
He did. Why is matter so fierce against spirit? Why must the spirit suffer its hour? He felt human animality just can't tolerate being surpassed.
And his own efforts were misinterpreted.
Ironically, yes. He avoided applause, but his self-overcoming was called arrogance. His solitude wasn't forgiven. He felt that injustice, that isolation, keenly.
Did he ever see any value in the materialistic view?
He had moments, acknowledged a certain courage in facing chaos without divine help. And from a purely virile survivalist view, pity and goodness could look like weakness.
He saw the common man as balanced, but he wasn't.
Right. The common man fit his earthly environment. He didn't. And nature seemed to reward the arrogant, the cunning, with success. Guaranteed life to the strong, the selfish. The world's ideal looked very different from the Gospels.
And he found resonance with Nietzsche around this time.
Deeply. Nietzsche's critique of the market, the masses, their resentment of the exceptional individual, it mirrored his own experiences.
Which led him to question the gospel's practicality.
Seriously question it. Could this sublime utopia actually work on Earth, given our animal instincts, biological laws? Was the gospel, in a sense, anti-biological?
Because the world runs on different rules.
Force, mostly. Condemns weakness, praises revolt. Patience, forgiveness, seen as foolish. The two worlds, ideal and real, had contradictory systems.
He also saw through public opinion.
Saw it often as just an attitude, adopted for personal gain, for compensation, understood the hidden games, the deceptions of social life.
And felt God was distant.
In that earthly darkness, yes. Matter denied spirit, reality crushed the ideal. The world just demanded wealth, conformity.
What was the advice you got?
Just discard the spirit. Become a man of the series, fit in. His attempt to escape that was seen as unforgivable pride. He felt like he had to undergo bestialization to be accepted. Lower himself.
How long did this crisis last?
Lived this drama for a year, he says. Suffering with the world, trying to understand it deeply. It was brutalizing, but also strengthening. Stripped away his naiveties.
Did he conclude people are just evil?
No, not always for its own sake. The world gave harsh but maybe honest answers. Selfishness is necessary for survival when altruism is just talk.
Applying the gospel literally.
Individually in that world.
Yeah.
Leads to certain death, he concluded. Spiritual, social annihilation. The gospel's kingdom needs collective conquest, a shift in everyone.
How did he justify his own perceived failures then? And the world's?
Blamed the current state of humanity, the strength of material laws. We're just not evolved enough yet collectively to fully live Christ's program.
He also criticized modern civilization's effect on the spirit.
Yeah, the constant distraction, no time for reflection, suppresses the spirit, leads to this weird, vague discontent everyone feels but can't quite name.
Because the focus is wrong.
Focused on the masses, material progress, individual spiritual problems seem irrelevant. He saw his book, his story, as a spiritual aristocrat rebelling against his time, trying not to be crushed by the crowd.
And this kind of experience isn't for everyone?
Not for the masses, he states clearly. It's an aristocratic experience. The book is an exaltation of spiritual freedom against material slavery, a reaction against modern uniformity, a claim for inner inviolability.
He reached a point of being willing to give it all up.
If necessary, yes. Honesty was paramount. His life was an experience of the gospel. If he felt the gospel fell too, in a way. For him, at least.
He couldn't understand his repeated failures in the practical world.
Baffled him. Why was he always defeated on the terrain of utility, while others, less scrupulous perhaps, triumphed? He felt his simplicity, his sincerity somehow provoked offense.
He felt he had to learn the world's game.
With bitterness, yes. The beautiful game of respectable people, but his reactions were slow, conscious, always trying to preserve honesty, justice, even while learning to navigate.
Did he feel he could keep that up?
No, he felt he couldn't resist that inferior environment for long. A new revolt, a resurrection of his spirit felt inevitable. All the dark experiences would propel him back towards the light.
He also observed issues with societal structures, generational schemes.
Yeah. Saw how those often clash with individual abilities. He wanted to reach the individual beyond those forms, focus on substance, not just the label or category people fit into.
The world of illusion caused him pain.
Agony. Had to make distrust a habit for protection. Longed for a higher plane, for sincerity, for faith.
And the genius is penalized.
For being abnormal, alone.
Yeah.
In a world focused on the basics, the stomach, the spirit gets sidelined.
He felt empathy for the unevolved.
Deeply. Felt their burden crushed by labor, chained to matter. Harsh reality making the ideal seem like a dream. Their pain gave them the right to desperate reactions, he felt. Felt abandoned by a hidden God.
And he turned back to the Beatitudes.
Reflected on them. Christ's path.
Because he'd bet everything on Christ.
Staked it all on his word. If he was ultimately defeated, it would disprove it. At least for him.
This core conflict kept repeating.
Yes, torn between two lives. He used that powerful image. Christ meeting Pilate. Two truths confronting each other in silence.
Pilate representing
the utilitarian world. Practical earthly power. Wouldn't understand Christ's otherworldly truth. For that world, actions speak louder than words.
And love thy neighbor. How did he expand on that?
As the second law. Moving beyond just individual selfishness, towards preserving the species, the collective we are.
He saw a progression in human instincts.
Yeah. First, self-preservation. Then the instinct to evolve spiritually, which is less deeply rooted.
And selfishness evolves too.
Expands. First the self, then family, which looks like altruism from the outside. Then wider groups, each expansion seen as altruistic by those on lower planes.
But true evangelical communion needs more.
Demolition of selfish separatism. The person living by the third law identifies with all humanity.
What about the Superman, the exceptional individual? What's their fate?
Destined to be hated, he thought, by the inferior, the selfish, the envious, their sensitive, reflect the world's pains, face the mystery alone, considered abnormal. Fate is martyrdom or heroic triumph, no retreat possible.
History confirms this pattern.
Humanity condemns genius, persecutes them, only later offers exaltation. Struggle, martyrdom, actually nourish the mission.
And his own goal was to live by that highest law.
The third law, love thy neighbor, exhaust himself in good deeds, sacrifice, waste nothing.
Could he escape this path? Through mysticism or regression?
No, impossible for him. The path of the cross remained, final obstacles just strengthened the mission. His fall was brief, but necessary.
He felt he'd overcome the worst.
Mastered the wave of trial, ready to rise again, tempered by overcoming.
And loving your neighbor required.
Forgetting yourself, being reborn in others' lives, assisting everyone, no selfish gain, even the ungrateful.
But the practical questions remained.
How do you live by divine rules of giving in a world of stealing? How spread justice in a selfish world? How resist exploitation while doing spiritual work? Huge challenges.
People misuse ideals.
Often twist love thy neighbor to serve their own selfishness. Principles become tools for biological reality, for self-interest.
Appearances are deceptive.
The world uses them to mask self-interest. The ideal can even become a refuge for the inept, a cloak for parasites.
But spiritual suicide isn't the answer.
Life's laws don't tolerate it. The world will eventually face its own terrestrial hell, the consequences of its choices.
Modern thinking demands proof.
Yeah, a critical mindset. One's earthly justification for heavenly truths. Life itself needs to change, not just talk. He felt his book was for anyone connecting with these issues beyond labels, leaving judgment to the individual.
As he neared the end, physically declining, what were his final reflections?
Felt his own smallness, but also the infinite greatness of the indestructible spirit. The wisdom of evolution. Surrendered to God's law, could even smile at providential selfishness serving the whole.
He saw hope for the world.
Saw it struggling towards social justice, harmony, felt he'd contributed his part despite difficulties. His mission felt true, fulfilled.
And his relationship with Christ?
Never denied him despite temptations. Felt Christ hadn't betrayed him. The evangelical experience bore fruit. The ideal did persist against worldly negation. That gave his life meaning.
He had final thoughts on evolution and pain.
Evolution requires effort, work, pain, reconstructing lost paths. Materialistic pleasure leads backwards to more pain. Liberation comes only through the hard work of spiritual ascent.
The world misunderstands this.
Totally. Ignorant of life's laws, wrongly tries to escape pain through selfish pleasure instead of growth.
Error is part of the process.
Inherent in reconquering light, ignorance, ill will, they cause disorder, suffering.
There's a law of consequence.
Responsibility, equilibrium. Actions demand compensation. Humanity must learn to cooperate fraternally within the law.
What about joy?
Arrest it. Encouragement not to give up the work of ascension. True joy belongs to the highest reconstructor, like St. Francis.
So progress is escape from pain.
Towards God, joy, away from the lower pain. Reconstructing order according to divine law.
And happiness.
A known good, but lost, needs regaining. Love thy neighbor is key for that social coordination, that restoration.
He felt forced to seek refuge near the end.
From a savage world, yeah. Lacked the insensitivity needed for easy earthly life. But his moral sensitivity wouldn't let him escape into pure mysticism either. Had to endure the human hell.
And as his body weakened,
his spirit intensified, confirmed his belief in resurrection beyond earth, beyond death.
He relived past experiences.
Mystical ascensions, yeah. Felt them converging towards a final, profound realization at death. A spiritual event long promised, desired by divine justice.
How did he prepare?
Inwardly. Faith, humility, anticipating superhuman joy. A final sacrament, consecration to God. Waiting for a sign of love, unification.
What were his very last moments like?
Found peace in nature, in his soul. Recalled his long labor, the mistreatment, but without bitterness.
A sense of release?
Liberation, lightness. Intensified awareness of heaven. Separation from the world felt easy, peaceful.
A transitional state.
Between wakefulness and sleep. Earthly and heavenly reality. Awaiting something new, decisive, promised for death.
And then?
A light drew near, with a song of supreme beauty.
What happened when he was freed from his body?
His soul hurled itself into Christ's light, perceived everything more profoundly, new sensitivity, felt the universe's vibrations rushing towards him.
A sense of ascent.
Felt Christ's light ascend, moving away from earthly vibrations, supreme joy, disorder left below, sense new laws, a new world he was entering,
And the essence of his life, the seed.
concentrated into a force, seeking to expand now for the good of the world, a final sacrifice for the new civilization of the spirit.
A sacrifice with a purpose.
To make that seed immensely fertile, leading inevitably to ascension. The triumph of spirit over matter, light over darkness, joy over pain, good over evil, bringing God's kingdom to earth.
Wow, okay. So for you, the learner, it really lays out this incredibly intense personal journey.
It really does.
It's fundamentally about that clash, isn't it? Between the ideal we reach for and the tough realities we actually face.
That constant tension.
A lifelong search for spiritual understanding, set against major societal changes. And ultimately, seeing the power and suffering and sacrifice to transform us.
Absolutely. His story really highlights this deep belief in human potential, doesn't it? This constant struggle against just settling for materialistic values.
Yeah, and an unwavering commitment to some higher truth, even when it's hard. And it ends with this really powerful vision of spiritual resurrection. Hopeful, in a way.
And understanding this narrative, it can offer you, the learner, a really valuable lens for looking at your own path, your own search for knowledge and meaning.
Makes you think, doesn't it? About what progress really means,
Huh?
about the cost of idealism, and the potential we have for change, both personally and as a society.
Definitely. And that whole exploration of individual versus collective values, that search for what's authentically true in a world that often feels, well, confusing,
Yeah,
that resonates with anyone trying to find deeper understanding today.
for sure.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with: the learner. Considering the whole arc of his life, his final experience, how might our own ideas of success or fulfillment need to shift
Just how?
to include not just, earthly achievements and material things, but also that whole dimension of spiritual awakening? And maybe more personally, what seeds are you nurturing in your own life right now, perhaps through struggles you're facing, seeds that might contribute to the future you envision?